Francis Newton Sousa, a seminal artist of modern Indian art, a creative intellectual, a versatile genius, a dynamic and a radical artist, known for his establishment of the Progressive Artist Group in Bombay post-independence and within the colonial context, whereby he had exhorted the artists to move away from any of the historical art of the past and to paint their own contemporary reality with styles and techniques derived from the path-breaking avant-garde artists of modern Europe who had invented different methods and methodologies in art. He was born in 1924 at Salegaon in Goa, and he lost his father at a young age of when he was just 3 months old, as well as he lost his sister. His mother moved to Bombay, where she took up the work of a dressmaker. He joined a St. Xavier school, but he was expelled from there for his nefarious activities of drawing pornographic works on the walls of the toilets. In 1940, he joined the J.J. School of Art and was expelled also from there. But he showed exceptional skills in drawing and in mastering the human form. And while at the school of J.J., he did win many prizes and impressed many of his teachers. But in 1945, he was expelled from the school for his activities in the Quit India movement. After which, Sousa joined the Communist Party because he found an affinity of his ideologies with them. He worked for the party, creating many painted canvases that showed the poor working class, as well as factory workers, farm laborers, prostitutes, the poor, the working class, which he saw around them in the slums of Bombay. And his works were also very much appreciated by the party members, and he continued to do so. But one solo exhibition which he held, where he exhibited paintings that he had painted in the way he had wanted to paint and with the themes and the styles he wanted to, the party leader who visited the exhibition was very unhappy with his work, and he told him that painting has to be done for the sake of the proletariat and the community and not for oneself. This remark upset Sousa, and he decided that he would do exactly what he wanted, and he abruptly left the Communist Party. He always felt that an artist paints only for himself and not for any other person or the proletariat or aristocracy or nobility or whatever. And he believed very strongly in his soul that he painted only for himself, and he painted what he wanted to, what he thought, and what he felt like. As a matter of fact, he had also made a remark that without art, man would become so boring. And that is what art was for Sousa. But Sousa's art somehow was very rebellious in character, very complex, very radical. And his aim was always to create a sensation through his art. As he developed his art, of course, there were many influences which came to it. First and foremost, he was influenced by the Goa's native folk art tradition, Renaissance paintings, the religious fervor of the Catholic Church, the landscapes of 18th and 19th century in Europe, and of course, most important and most vital, which affected him, was the path-breaking avant-gardist modernist style as it developed in Europe in the 19th and the early part of the 20th century. There is always a recurring theme of conflict of man-woman relationship with emphasis on sexual tension and friction. Somehow, Sousa always felt that he was not well understood and that he strove for something in order that he may attract the attention. But of course, one fact remains that at the young age of 35, he published his autobiography known as The Nirvana of the Maggot, that was published in London in 1955. And it marked the rising ascent of his star as far as his painting career was concerned. It brought him a lot of fame, also brought him a lot of publicity, and his works began to be recognized outside the country internationally. In his autobiography, he had mentioned many memories of his early childhood, which to a certain extent, as Ratan Parimu puts it, is narcissist in character. He was full of egotism, love for himself, and at the same time he suffered and was a tortured soul. So there were many aspects of his childhood, of his upbringing, of his reality, social and cultural reality around him, which made him a rebel. But at the heart of all this was his extreme passion and committed dedication to create a painting what he thought and what he felt was good enough. So much so, we find that the radicality and the provocation that he produced on his canvases hence was equally augmented and matched by the sharpness and the provocation that he brought to his prose as the autobiography that he published, plus in many of his writings where he spoke his mind and heart out and he was not concerned as to how the world will look at him. Stylistically, if we have to look at Sousa's art, he was a master of human form, and one cannot imagine Sousa's art without the representation of human form, both male and female. His subject repertoire consisted of landscapes, still life, nudes, and Christian iconography rendered bold as well as in frenzied distortion of forms. He always felt that there has to be a representation whereby he could convey his ideas and his emotions and sentiments, particularly through line. So when we look at his art, his paintings or drawings stylistically, there is always a thick bounding line which comes from his exposure to the expressionist paintings that he saw. And at the same time, there is these bounding thick black lines surround his human forms, which are extremely distorted, and the same kind of distortion also appears in the faces with misplaced features, with many eyes, noses elsewhere, half face in profile and half in full. And in this manner, he created these kind of complex distortions which suited his main objectives and ends. When it came to Christian iconography, he particularly centered on Christ, either the Last Supper or his crucifixions or many other themes. He took immense interest in rendering them in a complex manner, in a confusing manner, and he always found these to be radically, impatiently, radically he observed them, and he always found himself confounded by this contrast of profanity and sacredness, which immensely interested him. So when we look at his works, his representation of the female nudes are unbridled, graphic in manner, and they are provocative, powerful images. And he shows them without any hint of sophistication or any hint of any other way which could make the works more appealing, but rather it was on the face that he created the works, and he felt nothing about it in representing his works in this manner. So when we look at Sousa's works, even if it's a landscape, there is such a distortion of the architectural forms, and he creates this in a very conscious manner to upset the viewer and to give a very different appeal to his works. Sousa, in this context of his art, hence remains a rebel, a revolutionary, radically a dynamic painter that India hasn't known in a long time. And what is most important is that he is the first Indian artist to have been acclaimed and accepted internationally. He left India in 1949 for London, and he had to struggle there in the early years. He came back again in 1950, was here for some time, and again he left for London. where somehow he was able to find a foothold, he was able to create a niche for himself, and especially the autobiography that was published. And he also participated in a few exhibitions with important artists like Francis Bacon and others. And one collector who came to one of these exhibitions, which was a group show, was surprised to know that Newton was an Indian artist and that he could produce such works. And in this show, all of his works that were displayed were sold. So he slowly found acceptance, he gained popularity, and in 1965 he shifted to New York, where he obtained the Guggenheim International Award, and he lived there for the rest of his life, of course visiting India in between, and continued to create his works that remained seminally radical and different. He is also considered to be India's Picasso because he found the cubist broken structure that found affiliation, or that found a kind of a wavelength related to his mentality and the mental makeup, and he used that completely in his work. So the broken structural form together with the thick application of the brushstrokes of color, the outlines in black, and also experimenting with different kinds of techniques and mediums, Souza did not leave any arena unfounded or unexplored, and he continued to experiment either in painting or in drawings or in sketchings, and was able to find acceptance of his work amongst the international patrons as well as the Indian artists. So he became legendary, he became influential, and he set an example that an artist can do what he wants to do if he's convinced enough that what he's producing is not for anybody but for himself. And if that conviction is there, then it is possible for any artist to remain creative and continue to work in the manner that he would always want to work. Thus, Souza remains one of the most important, seminal, influential artists of India who gave modernity a push in a different direction and established a different spirit of modernism in India, particularly post-independence within the post